banking. You have 5 of the major banks control about 50% of the nation's savings. You have BlackRock and Vanguard, 2 of the multi-trillion-dollar money management firms controlling a lot of pension money and institutional passive investing money. You have beef processors. You have down to 3 or 4 beef processors. You have thousands of farmers across America. Those are the guys that do the really hard work, raising cows, doing their thing, and they get screwed by the middlemen, the processors. And that's the same for beef, for pork, for poultry. We've allowed, and again, it started really badly in the 80s. And when you look at the wealth inequality in America, it stems from a massive consolidation of businesses down into a few oligarchies. And that's before even tech. We'll talk about tech next. But the basic things of life, insurance. You buy health insurance. Health insurance is regulated state by state by state. And so in your local market, you probably have 1 or maybe 2 insurance providers. You have 1 or 2 hospitals to compete with. The regulations feed the beast of big business, because big business can withstand the delays and all the compliance nonsense that all these extra regulations that Washington continues to pile on onto big business. That's okay. They just stick it to the customers, and they pay higher fees. All the small businesses, the little guys that are starting in their garage or their basement with a good idea, they get squeezed out. They cannot survive it. And so even public companies, you have a significantly less public companies now than you did 20 years ago. You have a consolidation and an elite that are making those big decisions, which is why they feel confident enough that they can have cancel culture and they throw people out of banks if they don't like your politics. The pricing that is charged is they have above market average pricing that they get now versus what they've ever had historically, because of the effectively, it's not a monopoly, but it's an oligopoly. When you have a couple of sellers in the market, it's very easy for them to cooperate and to collude on raising prices to stick it to their customers. Or in some cases, what's called a monopsony, which is if they're the sole buyer. So if you have one large factory or an Amazon warehouse that's big in the area, they can really control what pricing gets paid for wages. Why are wages going down or not going up, especially under Dems? It's because they love to flood the market with more and more cheap labor that makes big business happy. They have more and more regulations, which keeps the small guys down and out. That is the paramount question that must be fixed in the American economy, or the American republic with a really healthy middle class is gone. You're going to have elites and everybody else that is struggling to survive, and that is not what made America great.
That's a damn good point that I haven't thought of.
And listen, I challenge you and your readers, when you go in the grocery store and you'll see 6 or 8 different kinds of packaged meats, it's all just brand facade. It's often 1 or 2 different companies with different brands. It's
an umbrella company with a bunch of different names underneath of it.
When you look at the consolidation, it's like a matrix that goes from 50 companies down to a few. And they keep a lot of those brand names functioning, so people have the perception that there's multiple companies in competition, but it's not anymore. Beer. 80-90% of the beer in America is 2 companies.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So again, that's why Anheuser-Busch can put people in charge that hate their customers that much that they do really stupid, out of market, offensive stuff and think they can get away with it.
Yeah.
So whatever boycott and righteous anger that normal people feel towards Bud Light, in the end, it's not going to move the needle, because they have 10 other brands that people will still buy from. If you really want to protest against big beer, then buy from your absolutely local microbrew guys, because that's who needs the help to survive.
Very true. Very true. Well, Eric, let's keep going down the subject pipeline. But, I know that's probably the only reason you came back for the gift.
Came for the gummy bears. Right.
Well, there's something different in there. So I'm big on brain health now. So there's some coffee.
Okay.
It's got functional mushrooms in it.
Lord knows I need some brain health.
Yeah. So yeah, layered superfoods, coffee, creamer, and performance mushrooms.
Thank you.
Supports brain health. But so I got a ton of questions for you, and then you have a list of stuff you'd like to cover as well. I want to start with the cartel and the border situation. There is roughly about 100,000 deaths a year.
109,000 last year.
From fentanyl overdoses coming up through the southern border. We know that China's coming across, teaching these guys how to make the deadliest fentanyl known to man. Now they're moving on to another drug, which the name escapes me right now, but it's going to be more potent than fentanyl. And China's also shipping in all the supplies for the cartels to make the fentanyl. Now, a lot of these presidential candidates are talking about sending in the military. DeSantis, I interviewed him, and he wants to send in strike teams to hit these cartels. Ramaswamy, I interviewed him. He wants to utilize the military to combat the cartels. What's your take on this? I think you got a very different take.
Well, this goes way back to the 1840s when the Chinese started what was called their century of humiliation. And you had the Opium Wars, where you had trade colonies carved out, what became Hong Kong, Kowloon, on the southern China at the bottom of the Pearl River. The opium that was pushed into China, which came out of India at that point, definitely had adverse effects. And so what China is doing now is a double FU back to the United States or the West, period, for that. It is absolutely CCP, Chinese Communist Party policy to create the precursor chemicals in China, actually not far from Wuhan, oddly enough, the same place that the COVID labs were. So those precursor chemicals are sent to Mexico and to Venezuela. Eventually, they're made into labs in Mexico and pushed across the border through the cartel network. And worse than that, the Chinese are even directly intervening into Mexican politics to support very leftist candidates. AMLO, the Lopez Obrador, who's the president, is a committed hard leftist, and the Chinese want to keep him in office because he is not the law and order candidate. He was the hugs and love candidate against the cartels, promising to take no stand. And so Mexico daily, weekly creeps closer to becoming a full-on narco state where the cartels really have that say. But it is the cartels make as much money moving humans as they do drugs. And in some cases, they get both because they'll have the people that they're smuggling across also carry a backpack of drugs, so they get a twofer because they'll charge $15,000-$20,000 to move a human, but when that human moves $50,000 worth of drugs, they're really making money all the way. So it is the problem starts much farther upriver than just going after cartels. Action should be taken inside of China. And when the Secretary of State, U.S. Secretary of State, goes there, has a meeting in China, and they say, well, yes, there's chemicals coming out of China, but it's really just a matter of them mislabeling it and accidental shipping it. It is a willful ignorance and denying the problem that the Chinese are actually behind this because the U.S. continues to send Treasury Secretary, Commerce Secretary, diplomats, pleading to have meetings with the Chinese, not that they're getting anywhere, but they think the point of a meeting is to have another meeting. And it is a It's like I said last time. I said we're going through a period of the late 70s now of a Carter administration, and that's the same outcomes we're seeing in a lot of places, a lot of problem areas around the world. So to answer your question, yes, cartels, big problem. It is funded, directed, organized by the Chinese Communist Party. And so dealing with the cartels is dealing with a symptom. I think we should deal with the root cause, which is in China. And sending the military. Look, the U.S. has had two major incursions into Mexico. One was about 1845, where we literally invaded and went to Mexico City. We don't need to do that. And there was certainly banditry in the border areas around 1900, Pancho Villa, et cetera.